All right, welcome to Fundamentals of Meeting Management for Prevention Coalitions and Local Prevention Councils. My name's Mark Nickel. I'm from the Connecticut Prevention Training Technical Assistance and Service Center. I'm here with my colleagues, Ken Ford, Jennifer Jacobson, Lisa Mason, and David Reyes Lespar. Uh, Another individual will be joining us a little bit later. Uh, The Prevention Training Technical Assistance Service Center, or TTASC, is funded by the Connecticut Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services Center, DEMIS, and we're one of the statewide prevention resource link partners. Similar to the regional behavioral health action organizations, we're here to help you do your coalition work. And this particular training has been designed with input from our team, as well as others from the RBHAOs, including Janice Anderson, Sarah Lorenzini, Courtney Widrick, Jeremy Kosbob, Jennifer Buckley, Nicole Mason, Deborah Walker, and other folks who participated in some pilots along the way. So we will be recording. Our objectives today, at the end of the 2-hour period, we're going to be asking you some simple questions. Did you learn some new tools and techniques today? How was your meeting experience? Have you identified 1 or 2 priority items that you can work on to improve your meeting space? Did you have fun? Did you meet some new colleagues? And our expectations for you today is we want you to be very interactive, be civil and kind, be positive. Keep your mics off unless you're speaking. You can turn your cameras on when you feel comfortable. You can turn them off. Make sure that you are drinking and hydrating and exercising self-care throughout this. Stand up and stretch. If you need to eat, that's fine. And try and just get yourself in a space where you can feel present. Our agenda today is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to take about 15 minutes and work on some fundamentals and some high-level knowledge. Then we're going to move into some techniques and resources for meeting management, more of the tactical level, the nuts and bolts. We're going to do a little self-care break. And then the last part of the session, we're actually going to go into small groups, and you are going to work on some of the things that you believe are the highest priority areas for you to make immediate improvements in your approaches to managing your meeting and collaborative workspace. But before we get into all this, we want to start off with an interactive poll. And this is one of your real-time meeting tips, which is, this is all about behavior. So when you are engaging people in a meeting space, you want to make sure that you're encouraging participation right away. You're not training them up to sit still and listen. So when we do interactive polls today, you're going to see them on a screen. So that you get a sense of what's coming at you. Then I'm going to stop the screen share, and we're going to do the poll. So in this case, we're going to ask some just everyday questions. I've organized a family event such as a family meeting, birthday, wedding party, or reunion. If you've done that, you check the box. I've used a recipe to make or bake something. I've participated in a band, choir, or some type of team. So that's the poll that's coming at you. And then in the our chat box challenge, we're going to ask you to type in your favorite thing to make or bake. And just to get a sense of how robust our engagement is today, the chat box challenge comes with the notion that in a couple of minutes, a small group or a group this size should be able to generate 100 plus ideas or responses in the period of 3 to 5 minutes. So I'm going to stop the screen share, and Ken is going to put up the interactive poll. So check any of the statements that are true for you. And then remember, we have the chat box challenge for you. So what's your go-to recipe to make or bake? Okay, Ken, you want to share the results?
Can everybody see those results? It shows that I'm sharing them currently.
Okay.
It looks like, according to our poll, everybody has organized a family event and used a recipe to make or bake something and have participated in a band or choir or some type of team.
All right. And if you look in the chat box, we've got it all. We've got brownies, cookies, squash soup, sweet potato pie, cheesecake bars, and the names are also connected to each of them.
I'm getting hungry looking at this chat box.
And the good news with the 100% responses across all of those different areas, that's everyday behavior that can play itself out in your meeting management and leadership. So we're going to be constantly revisiting some examples of everyday behavior because you probably have more experience and more knowledge and wisdom than you realize that you can apply to your meeting management at prevention or LPC meetings. So at the highest level, we just want to touch on some fundamentals and kind of frame the space. We're going to be talking about coalitions, groups, teams, and back to that poll. If you're on a choir, if you're part of a sports team, part of a band, anything like that, you already are in that space of group behavior, and your coalition is a group. And as a group, you are organizing and strengthening behaviors that you want to see in the context of that group and the context of the purpose for that group. So as a leader or the meeting manager, but I'm going to be referring to you as a leader, part of your job is to cultivate this high performance team. And part of the way that you do that is you're going to be promoting a shared vision. You're going to be communicating clearly about what the work plan is, the purpose of the individual meetings. You're going to be coaching and onboarding and guiding your members. And to do all of that, if you look at the information in the blue box, there's going to be some higher level knowledge pieces that the more familiar you are with those, or if you have someone on your team who has mastery of that, it will lend itself to a more productive meeting space. So our working assumptions, again, you're a prevention group. You're going to be holding multiple meetings. The activities of your meetings are actually going to be changing over time, which is going to require your leadership behavior. And your meeting space is going to be connected to all sorts of other things like your charter, where you are in the strategic prevention framework process, how many resources you have available, and other factors. So in general, the other factors that are affecting your workspace are your group structure and process, your leadership staff support, how you set up your your space with your group dynamics and your social contract, and then your path through the strategic prevention framework. So we're just going to touch on these very quickly. There are other trainings that devote themselves specifically to these topics. Your prevention coalition, so you're in that prevention space. There's a whole training on prevention fundamentals. But I think the thing that we want to point out here is everyone is doing prevention. You can figure out how to engage people because if you're a parent, you're doing prevention, whether you hug your child or you're promoting pro-social behavior. If you're a teacher, you're doing prevention. If you're a faith community leader, you're doing prevention. Everyone somehow is playing a role in prevention. And so if you look at that continuum above of health promotion and promotion, prevention, treatment, one of the things that we want to point out is this is how prevention is typically portrayed, but you also want to engage your treatment community. Treatment is actually prevention. Recovery supports prevention. So this is where we get into that space of when you as a leader are creating your collective collaborative workspace in this area of prevention, you have to make sure you have a grasp of what that means to you, what that means to this group, and how to engage with people in your space. And here's just a different way to look at it. Often across the layers of prevention, there's the individual choice, interpersonal, school and work environments, neighborhood community, and then the higher level policy. So again, prevention is working its way across and through all of these different layers of life and community. And as a collaboration, prevention coalition, you are trying to figure out how are we creating an environment to strengthen those prevention behaviors, to increase access to positive activities, to decrease access to substances, and facilitate access to treatment and so on. So in working across all those different layers as prevention groups, we use the 12-sector collaboration model. And again, this is your collaborative workspace. By definition, our prevention coalitions are supposed to be engaging all of these different partners. All of these different partners may have a different take on what prevention means to them or how they perceive themselves contributing to the prevention environment. So again, as a leader and a keeper of your collaborative workspace, it's incumbent on you to be engaging with each of your partners and understanding where they're coming from and how you can expand that common ground. And so, again, you start to see the writing on the wall, which is you have a lot to manage when you are creating this collaborative workspace. You are looking across all of these different partners. You're translating how everyone fits together and how you play together. So we get all of these partners together and you say, look, as a prevention group, we use this strategic prevention framework approach. And we go through these 5 steps: assessment, capacity, planning, implementation, evaluation. There's an entire training on the strategic prevention framework, or the SPF. Lisa from our team has been doing these trainings pretty regularly. And we have other tools that are available to help you. But if you look on the left-hand side, you see kind of the core question that's connected to each of the 5 steps. And then on the right-hand side, you see some other principles about diversity, equity, inclusion, sustainability that get built into each of those steps. Now, our work here today about improving our meeting management and, essentially improving, how our teams perform is part of an ongoing capacity building step. So we're gonna, reference our work today as if it's always a part of capacity building, which a coalition is always doing. As your members are changing, you're adding new members and so on. But along the way, your meetings might look different because in your assessment meeting, you might be collecting information or discussing that or identifying which priorities are most relevant to your community. Later on, if you're in an implementation step, your meetings might look more like progress reports or updates or sharing and celebrating success stories. So again, your meeting management is going to be adjusted to which step of the SPF you are in at that particular time. So any questions in the chat box so far? We're going over this pretty quickly because these are trainings that are covered elsewhere, but this is fundamental knowledge that will help you lead and navigate through your meeting management space.
No questions so far, Mark, in the chat box.
Excellent. All right. We're going to move into our interactive pool number 2, and this one is going to help us transition into our next part of the agenda. So the poll that's going to be coming at you, again, you check the statements that you believe are true for you. Members know each other by name. Oh, Ken put it up, so I'm going to stop the share. Every member of your group can state the mission and purpose. You've got a charter or bylaws for your group. Your membership is defined. 3 out of every 4 have working knowledge of prevention. 3 out of every 4 have working knowledge of the SPF. Okay, one other thing that I would like you to do is on a piece of paper on notes for yourself, write down the areas that your group can improve on, because those will come into play later in our small group discussions.
Would you like the results displayed?
Yep. So now before we talk about results here, we're going to create some context so that we are gentle and diplomatic in interpreting these results. So everyone is answering these from a different place or a different perspective. So rather than get on everyone's case, for example, about 100% of members can state the mission and purpose. That's our lowest scoring, tied for low. That could be a reflection of a great thing that happened out in the environment in which we have many new members in our coalitions that maybe are just attending their first meeting. And that's why it's so low. We just don't know. But the point of that particular one is your dream as a coalition leader or a meeting management leader is that everyone who walks through the door is on the same page about what your mission is, what your purpose is. And they can all state that. This same theme is true if you were talking about board members on a nonprofit. The same would be true if you're talking about, folks who are attending a faith community. Why do you attend that community? What is that all about? So there are some of these things that you as leaders can remedy very quickly. That's just the behavior of training people up on what it is that they should be saying, remembering, and giving them a chance to practice. Similarly, if you go down to the SPF knowledge, that's something that we can bring an SPF training to. And remember, if your group is going through this process, this strategic prevention framework approach of the 5 steps, and you're leading them, that's the roadmap. That is something that if they have a better handle on the roadmap, they're more likely to understand why you're doing things at certain times and want to take the journey with you. So again, part of getting these numbers up higher is going to help you do your work more productively and create a higher performing team. If you look at something like membership in the group is clearly defined, or people don't know if they're members or not, what happens when you take a vote or you need to decide something that's important or decide a priority? You as a meeting leader are going to find yourself in a situation where someone is going to say, this is the first time I've seen you here. And you're opposing everything we've done. Well, that's something now that is in your space, and you're going to have to manage through that. So we'll get to some of these as we go on. And then, the other thing, members know each other by name. That's something, it's back to your team dynamics. It's back to your meeting environment. People want to attend. Do they like coming? And I use an example with my group the other day when we were practicing this a little bit, and I said there was a study that was done with surgeons, and they used the safety checklist. And one of the things on the safety checklist was, do your team members on your surgery team know each other by name? And for the surgery teams that knew each other by name, their chances of catching complications or adjusting along the way improved by over 35%, because they were more likely to say something if they saw something. So all of these little things are, behavioral things that are showing up in multiple different environments, but there are things that we can all work on. We'll go back to the screen share. And we're going to move now into the nuts and bolts. And by nuts and bolts, I mean we're going to look at a critical framework for thinking about your coalition and developing your meeting. And then we're going to look at some of the top items that we typically encounter at TCAS that when these particular areas are improved, the meeting environment changes significantly. So before I get into that, how are we doing so far in terms of pacing and any comments, questions? Ken or Jen, anything in the chat box? We good?
Nothing in the chat box.
All right. So, working assumption that everyone is good. So, This first diagram is the big picture, your coalition process. And this, quite frankly, is a simple continuous improvement diagram. So you have inputs, process, outputs, and a feedback loop. And this is your critical thinking frame. And you can use this at the high level for developing a 1 year work plan. You can use this for managing a meeting or planning a meeting. What do I need? What are we doing? What happens? What do I get? And then how do we do? So you're constantly going around this racetrack. But the fact of the matter is, as you're going around the racetrack, you as the leader are going to be adjusting to the driving conditions. You might be slowing down at certain places. You might be speeding up. You might be getting passengers on the bus, letting passengers off. But the way that this particular diagram is set up and the what do I need, the inputs, those are all pieces of information that are most relevant to you creating that collaborative meeting space. The bylaws, the charter, the agenda, social contract, and so on. And we'll work our way through some of these nuts and bolts. So basic definitions: meeting, at least 2 people. Assembling. Again, we go back to, you know this, you've seen it in many different settings. Family meetings, faith environments, online dating, Zoom meetings. So we want to just up that from rather than just 2 people assembling, but you're actually creating a collaborative workspace. You're building a high performance team. So you're not just managing a meeting, you're creating and contributing to group dynamics that are going to create some value. And oftentimes, people start thinking money is time, time is money. Let's figure out your meeting calculator, what's going on. So we gave you an example there. 50 people are attending this meeting, and you assume that it's, if they're each being paid through wages and benefits about $25 an hour, and it's a 2-hour meeting. Right here, we're racking up $2,500 in spending of people's resources. So we stop and we say, wow, that sounds like a lot, but then we challenge ourselves and say, are we creating more value by investing this amount of money and this amount of resources in this activity? And that's where it gets back to you as a leader. That's part of your job, to create value from bringing and assembling these groups together or small teams. And the way that you do that is anchored in your charter and bylaws. So if your group doesn't have charters and bylaws or standard operating procedures, this is something that you want to pay attention to. It may be that they are informal, in which you are following rules, but they may not be written down. It might be time for you to write them down. It may be the case that you have them and you are not familiar with them. We're going to be sending you, the PDF of this, but we put in some slides here that have some resources on them of just common terms and definitions that you'll most likely run into if you're looking at charters and bylaws, and also talking about meeting management. So one of the things that we want to call out is your parliamentary procedure, or Robert's Rules of Order. And that is how you do your business. If you're a governing body, such as the Congress, it's very complicated. And oftentimes people want to reference Robert's Rules of Orders. But the fact of the matter is, you should develop some kind of parliamentary procedure or way of doing business that fits your community and fits your group. When things get too complicated, it actually reduces people's ability to participate and contribute. So we've been, as an example, in some situations where they have very complicated Robert's Rules of Orders, and only a few individuals in that particular group actually understand what they are. And what happens is that those few individuals then dominate the process and procedurally start disqualifying much of the other activity that's going on or much of the other conversation. So again, keep it very simple. So as a leader, we said, what are the questions that you should be asking? And what are documents in terms that will help you answer these questions? So again, this particular slide just goes through some of the things that you may already know, or some of the things where you might say, that's interesting. I'm not sure I know the answer to the question. I'm not sure if the answer to the question actually exists, which then means your group might need to talk about that. So again, looking at the fundamental pieces, who's a member, who's not a member, how do you make decisions, who's holding your group accountable, and how do you get your work done? So you're the leader. It's on you to create a shared understanding. So remember back to that notion of getting 100% of your coalition members or group participants to be on the same page, be able to state your purpose. For the XYZ coalition, we're focusing on this priority substance with this priority population. Our intent is to reduce X, Y, and Z use by such and such date and time. And this is the way we're going to do it. These are the partners who are helping, and here's the progress that we've had so far. Again, simple storytelling that everyone should be able to articulate. And when you do that, you're creating ambassadors, you're creating champions, and you are also developing your next generation of leaders. And we'll dig into this a little bit later. Another part of your role in creating that shared understanding is understanding what stage your high-performing team is at. Again, this is a document, or this particular chart is from group dynamics, group development, high-performing teams, continuous quality improvement teams. They typically go through 4 stages: forming, storming, norming, performing. And then there's another one for time-limited tasks. There's a 5th step called adjourning, which is it's the ending of that particular team. But as a leader, your work and your meetings might be influenced by what stage of development your team is in. If you're in the forming stage, you might find yourself spending more time getting to know each other, talking about your shared vision and how each partner fits in, getting to understand a strategic prevention framework process and how that works. And then, once you're all on the same page and feeling kind of good, you'll step into the work, which is this norming and performing. So this is just something that we want to make you aware of, because your group dynamics and where you are in your process will influence how your meetings are playing out. Another important factor in how your meetings are going to play out is your leadership style. And this is something that there is no right or wrong. Your style is your style. And so you want to be able to work to your strengths, and you want to create a team around you or a process around you that limits any shortcomings that might be connected to your leadership style, and most certainly amplify any of the strengths from your leadership style. So we put a very simple diagram up here that talks about the different leadership styles based on whether you're supportive or directive. And the cautionary note is if you look in what's labeled as S4, low supportive and low directive behavior, that's where some of our coalitions that we have worked with face a little bit of challenges if they have a staff member who is expected to do a majority of the work and may or may not be getting a lot of support from the chairperson or the leader of the coalition. So if you're in that space, that's okay, but just be aware that you have to make certain that there's a balance and a good communication flow between your staff person and whoever the coalition chair is. Any questions so far on these higher level pieces?
Nothing in the chat box, Mark.
Okay, we're gonna keep going. Going into the nuts and bolts. So now we're going into, a meeting. So just like your events, your family events, your recipes, there's a simple cycle that keeps repeating itself. You're going to plan something, conduct something, review something. Use that input from the review to plan the next one. And the other piece of information here, just like that iceberg, 90% of your work is going to be in preparation and 10% is going to show above the waterline at that meeting. And those are the times that people are going to be very happy that you did all of that prep work. So when thinking about the 3 phases that we put out here, we just collected a bunch of bullet points from our team that we believe if you're paying attention to these in each of these areas or each of these phases of meeting development, you have mastery of these or working knowledge at the very least, things will go well for you. And we are going to start unpacking some of these in the upcoming slides. But we want to keep reinforcing. Find a reference point that works for you. That's why we were talking about acquire, baking, being on a team. Use something that is familiar to you, that's familiar to understanding how to shape and strengthen and reinforce the behaviors that you want. So if, for example, we use that baking piece, think of a recipe and how a recipe is set up. That's your meeting, that's your agenda. There's a title, why you might want to cook this, what inspires you, why you're doing this, your ingredients list, all the things you need, how you need them, and then what you're going to do. Your recipe is basically a microcosm of that strategic prevention framework roadmap. And then depending on your leadership experience, you might say, well, you don't have eggs. I'm going to use an avocado or whatever it is that you might substitute. I might use applesauce. I might add something that's not even in the recipe. I'm going to add some secret dimension, that is connected to my heritage. Or I'm not going to, bake it this time. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to innovate and see what happens. Well, you can take that same base recipe and end up, just like the image of those cookies with very different looking and tasting cookies, all from that basic recipe. But that is going to come along as you get more comfortable in your leadership role and your meeting management space. So the next few slides that we're going to cover are the areas that our team often says, if you can do some of these better, your meetings are going to run a little bit more smoothly and your team is going to perform a little bit more effectively. So the first thing is, you're the leader, you need to be communicating. So clarity of role, responsibility, shared, that purpose, the mission. It might be connected to sending out information ahead of time so people can prepare and come prepared, be familiar. You want to be familiar with any technology that you're using. That is going to facilitate or limit your ability to communicate. And there are plenty of trainings on effective communication. Purpose. If you're thinking about a particular meeting, remember you're working in the context of that strategic prevention framework and in the context of where your group is. If they're a new team, if they're a well-oiled machine that's been together. So your meeting might have multiple purposes. You might be doing some team building, some networking. You might be doing knowledge building. You might be reviewing data that's connected to your needs assessment. You might be doing progress updates. But no matter what it is you're doing, you want each of your participants to be able to say, why am I coming here? What's the point of me? What are we doing? And that's the same question you would have if you got invited to an event. And so this is where, depending on all of those other factors that we were talking about, you might then start invoking some of these tools. And we put an image of the mall map up here back in the old days when people actually went to stores, because it's always great to know where you are and what else is out there. So the mall maps, as it were, for the strategic prevention framework are often shown in terms of a logic model or these logic diagrams. So the top one there is actually an example of underage drinking, and it works through the causal factors and then some of the evidence-based strategies and so on. And then you switch to that bottom diagram where it then walks the strategies through. Well, if we actually are doing that evidence-based strategy, what will be happening in terms of outputs and outcomes? Will more people be aware of something, which then will cause them to change their attitudes, which then will cause them to use a substance less frequently, which then will help our community have a different amount of crime rates or better educational attainment or whatever it is. That's how your roadmap starts getting translated from the higher SPF steps into your implementation plan. So if you are in a place at your meetings to be able to say, here's why we're here, here's where we are, at this point in time, here's what we've done so far, here's what we're going to be doing today, and here's where it's all leading. Simple storytelling process. It's easy, but it's not simple. Or it's, let me say it's simple, but it's not easy, because it's quite a bit to manage. Social contract. Again, this is about managing behavior and group norms. You've all seen this. You've been through these. Starting with your education, and your class rules, or your team behavior. And so again, get back to the notion of find a reference point that works for you and begin to build, what are the rules of engagement. Teachers during the pandemic found themselves in curious situations because when they switched to Zoom, they were able to see into the student's environment. And so now they were able to see things that they typically wouldn't see when a student came to them. So what then represents something that they should be reporting to Child Protective Services that they've seen, in the child's home environment? They found themselves in a completely different situation. And part of that was, we changed the rules of engagement. And it triggered all of these other questions and behaviors and activities. So you, as the leader of that meeting and the leader of that meeting space, are shaping the behavioral norms. If it's okay for people to eye gouge and everyone is good with that, then have at it. So as you're developing a social contract, we put a slide in here that you can refer back to a little bit later. Some of the questions that you might want to ask and answer, and then talk with your group. This is a group activity. And we gave you some sample phrases. So once you, as a group, have established this, you as a leader are going to be referring back to this. These are your rules of engagement. This is where you can provide that feedback to your group members when you have to. And the other thing that will just remind you of, it's okay for you to say to folks, look, I'm a leader. We have to manage time. That's my job. That's the hat I'm wearing. And that's why I'm doing this. If we had all the time in the world and this was a social event, I wouldn't be making this comment. Whatever style fits and works for you. So you've now got your group in a space where they're all on the same page about how they want to behave. Let's talk about the agenda. So I'm going to give you a non-example. So here's a famous Pablo Picasso painting, the Guernica. And someone asked him, how do you actually plan a painting like that? And Picasso says, look, I paint the picture to find out what it looks like. I don't plan these things. And this is a non-example for the agenda. This is not how you want to run your meeting. You want your agenda planned. And you want to be as explicit and clear as possible. So rather than have an item that just says something like community needs assessment, you want to have a time frame, and you also want to have a brief description. This way, again, as a leader, you're managing expectations, both what's going to happen during that time period. If people need to be preparing ahead of time, you can point that out. If there's going to be a subject matter expert who's going to be contributing or facilitating that part of the discussion, you can point that out as well. So your agenda is also your roadmap as a leader. And that is going to be something that you can keep coming back to with your feedback loop. How are we doing on time? What do we need to be talking about? Are we accomplishing what we set out to do? And Again, this is something that you want to plan well in advance. Make sure you have all of the information, the speakers if you need speakers, and so on. Other things that you can consider, if you get into a little bit more of the advanced level, here is how you're sequencing things. Because there is a method of setting up agendas where you sometimes want to do things to maybe help build that team or help people feel more comfortable if you're going to be asking them to be interacting. Or you want to make sure that you have them in a good space where if you're going to have a difficult discussion, you might want to put that in the middle so that that's not the last thing people walk out the door with. So again, you want to be able to hold your agenda for that meeting in your hands because you are responsible for that group energy, if you will. And that's something that you can influence by way of those, the social contract, the way you set the agenda, and the way that you're communicating during your meetings. Time management. There's that old saying, time is, the one resource that's not renewable. So again, you're managing behavior. So clear start times, clear end times, managing those expectations. Oftentimes, if you start noticing that people are showing up at 5 minutes after, 10 minutes after, a little trick is to start the meeting at 10 minutes after. Oftentimes, people then are all 100% on time because they know you're going to start at 10 minutes after, 5 minutes after, and you're taking your cue from them. Maybe they just can't make that transition or do some of those other things that they need to do. You can appoint another and it's a very obvious cue then to people that your time is now ended. And then before the meeting, do a little bit of contingency planning. What happens if there's twice as many people that come to your meeting? How is that going to change how you might have a discussion? Another part of your meeting management and leadership behavior is engaging people. So set the tone early. And you can do this very quickly. If you have a meeting that's fairly small, let people talk. Let people see each other. Let them share something that's positive. You can ask for input in a structured way if you want to make sure everyone has a voice. And this is something where if you notice that some people are not talking but have much to say, or they may feel or perceive that their voice is not important, create a structure. Newest to oldest member. And that lets the new folks speak first. And the oldest members, or if you have someone who is very outspoken, often if they speak, then other people might say, well, I'm just not going to participate. I think no one's going to agree that, my perspective. If people are not responding, you can, again, use that to your strength. Acknowledge no response is going to be viewed as consensus agreement. So later on, someone can't say, look, we never decided that. It's like, yes, we did decide that because we decided it based on the fact that no one said, no, I disagree. You can stimulate the discussion by taking an opposing point of view or looking at all different sides of the issue that you're exploring. You can use interactive polls, you can use stop voting if you're in person. There are all sorts of these little tactical moves that you can do to increase engagement. But remember, if you're increasing engagement, you have to manage your group dynamics. When you're back to your social contract, you're back to knowing, because you helped create that agenda, which of the topics on this agenda may unite or divide the group or create energy. Go back to your reference points of planning family events. Which people do you allow to sit next to each other? Know what's happening in your room, if it's a physical space, or how do you call out individuals who may be silent? And it might be just asking them, or if there's a break, engaging them in a break and hearing what they have to say, and then introducing that in a general way and exploring that with the group. But if you notice that people seem to be getting more agitated or passionate about something, you have to be able to start tapping on the brakes a little bit, allowing people to just take a deep breath. We're using some other phrases that we'll come up with. And then everything's not perfect, and it's not your job to be perfect. Remember, the circumstances and the conditions are going to keep changing. That's the nature of group dynamics. So it could be the case that when you're talking about something, you may run out of time. When you are moving toward a decision, you may run out of time. So have a quick checklist of, are we in a place that we feel good about moving forward, about making a decision? Do we need more information? Do we need more time? And this is where you're going to have to manage the tension of, we have a schedule to keep, and how do we figure out how to get everyone up to speed and get everyone comfortable without getting too far off schedule. Your decision-making process, and it goes back to the bylaws or your operating procedures. First, at the highest level, what decisions is your group in charge of? What decisions does it make? Are they programmatic? Are they financial? Who can participate? That membership question. Can whoever just walks into the room that day be part of your decision-making process? And then what are the nuts and bolts of it? Is it an actual vote? Is it a consensus approach where you're trying to get everyone on the same page, and it's okay for some people not to be on the same page? If you're voting, is it by a written ballot? Is it raising hands, oral, other, virtual? What are the voting options? And we typically keep it simple: yes, no, abstain. Abstain means for us, we like abstain often to mean I have some kind of conflict of interest. We don't want abstain to mean I don't want to take a position, I don't want to vote. It's your privilege to be voting, so vote yes or vote no. That's why we want you in the room as members and leaders. And then as you are getting through that voting process, make sure that you share the results with everyone. Another part of your meeting process is to be taking notes in whatever way, shape, or form makes the most sense for you, and to be very clear about any action items or next steps. So here's our little cone about nobody did it. And I'm not going to read this to you, but it's just the notion of, when you can identify what the next steps are, the person who will do it, an actual person, and a date by the time that task should be done, you as a meeting manager or leader will have a much better chance of keeping things on schedule or holding folks accountable. And then the last thing here is, if you are planning your meeting agenda and thinking it through, it's just back to that situational awareness. So you are managing expectations because it's clear what the purpose for that group is. It's clear why they're coming together and what they're going to be doing at that meeting. It's clear what the social norms are. Then when you think about participation levels, just think through what happens if we get twice as many people that show up. Does that change how we do things or the amount of time you would be willing to devote to something? And then, you know, the intangibles that you as a leader are going to have to be aware of, which is what is the cost for not staying on schedule? What is the cost for not making a decision? What is the cost for making a decision too quickly and having 100 people very frustrated with this? All of that is back on you as a leader. You know, it's connected to things that you can think about before you actually have a meeting. So we're going to switch now to our closing this out in an interactive poll. And again, this is going to be the same approach. You check the boxes that apply to the statements that are most true for you. And then we're going to take a little break and we're going to reconvene at about 11:10. So take this poll and we're going to restart at 11:10 and we're going to show you the results of the poll. And then we're going to go into our small groups. And that's where you're going to start working on the things that are nearest and dearest to your heart to improve your own meeting experiences. And then in the chat box, anything right now of things that we can do differently or things that we can do to improve your experience, we'll try and work that in the last segment as well. What do you think, Lisa? Oh, you're on mute.
I think this is great. And it's interesting how it aligns, with the CVAT, in terms of, those critical elements. It makes those critical elements sort of come to life, in terms of those are the what, this is the how. So I like this. I could even see doing some follow-up with this, with coordinators if they wanted to do like a study or a networking, around improvement plans or, what are some things I want to focus on? Sort of like a Project Echo kind of thing.
It makes the most sense. Giovanna is a wrangler of small children. managing adults should be easy, so we're going to offer her up as a subject matter expert.
I am no expert of anything.
Nor am I.
You'll appreciate this, Giovanna. Once I had to take both of my kids, who were probably like 4 and 6, to a coalition meeting because I didn't have a babysitter. And so we were sitting, the group was sitting at a table, and we had the good fortune to have another long conference table in the room. So I put the 4-year-old with supplies at one end of the very long and the 6-year-old at the other end of the very long table with things to do. And I said, okay, your job is to sit here quietly and do these things. And the 4-year-old managed about 30 minutes. And then she came over and said, can I sit in your lap? And I said, absolutely, you've been good. But one of my favorite memories is one of the Norwalk memories when Denique's kids showed up. Yes, and we got to work with them. We got to to keep them busy at the meeting. That was a fun time. That was fun.
It's, it's never a dull moment around, in the work that we do, right? But the blessing is that we can bring our children to work,
Yes,
right? And be able
absolutely.
to manage it.
Yes, and
Mentally, sometimes I think I'm at my capacity,
Yes.
but then
and there's
I'm blessed
times
that
when
we can.
coalition members need to bring kids if they're going to be able to be there. Yep.
So
And then
much
I
fun
remember that's why we're doing the work.
for them.
Yep.
Totally agree. Now, Lisa, how old are your kids?
Oh my goodness, 16 and a half, and my oldest will turn 19 at the end of the month.
Are they in school?
My the 19-year-old just graduated, and the 16 and a half is a junior.
Mhm.
She's starting to think about, plans for after, possible. She definitely wants to go to college. She's not sure exactly where or what, but
Mm.
for a kid with learning disabilities to be thinking about college, to me, is like humongous.
Mhm.
To be able to do that.
Good.
All right, you ready to get back?
No, we're having such a great conversation. Do we have to talk about work? Come on. All right, Mark.
All right, before we get into the poll results, go to the bottom of your screen under the reactions. And just pick an icon on how we're doing in terms of pace and so on. We have slow down, speed up, thumbs up. Tons of life out there. We have some folks responding. Okay, we're going to keep going. So this is another thing we want you to take some notes on when you're looking at these poll results. This is our gentle walk into our small group discussion space. So when you are thinking of attendance, your start and end times, the meeting environment, which connects to your group contract, your purpose and objectives, which connects to your agenda and how you're planning that, accountability and so on. People having high satisfaction in a positive meeting experience. Those are all things that we're going to talk about improving a little bit. So write down the things that are areas that are stones in your shoes or the pain points right now when you're thinking about your own meeting management? So we're going to switch into this, your top improvements. So a few more slides just to get you into the context of your critical thinking. When you're thinking about how do participants feel about attending the meetings right now, we have two axes for our productivity axis, low to high. That's the horizontal one, and the satisfaction, low to high. So if you look in quadrant number 1, that upper right-hand quadrant, that's the just, wow, I can't miss this meeting. We get stuff done. I love coming here. It's incredible. And then you go to the quadrant 3 at the other extreme, you have people who are saying, I come here because I have to, and it's a check the box. And there's all different experiences, but get a sense of, where you are right now, where your group is right now. And it's something to pay attention to because it can shift over time based on your leadership and how you set up that collaborative workspace. We included a little reference point here. Again, that is your leadership readiness. I've got knowledge of the SPF, the bylaws, you're clear on the work plan and milestones, roles and responsibilities, the people's names, all those little things that you should be thinking about. And then the other thing that if you are a more advanced leader, or your coalition or group is in a stage where it's pretty solid and pretty stable, one of the things that we like to ask the leaders is about their legacy. What is your leadership legacy going to be with this group? And how is that going to play itself out through your leadership contributions? And sometimes that has to do with the work. Sometimes that has to do with achieving a specific milestone. Sometimes some of the leaders are all about developing the next generation of leaders or increasing diversity of membership or other things like that. So as we get into the breakout room space, we want you to be thinking, what are some simple things that may not be easy, but simple things that we can identify to start working on. So we're going to break into 4 rooms, and you're going to have a T-task member from each of the participating in each of the rooms. And so in your group, we want you to share your name, maybe your affiliation, and then one positive statement, get that positive energy going. And then your main activity is going to be for each of you to identify at least one thing that you want to change about your meetings. And what's the problem and what are you going to do about it? And you have a bunch of other problem solvers in the room with you who are going to say, well, what about this? What about that? Maybe think about this. And through the course of that process, you'll also hear how some people are addressing other issues that may be relevant to your collaborative meeting space as well. And then if you're an advanced leader, you might want to tackle that leadership legacy question. Another thing we want you to do along the way, our little bonus activity, because we have high achievers, is what are some of your go-to phrases that you use or you would encourage people to use when they are managing time or difficult group dynamics. And an example that we used before was, everyone just, let's all take a deep breath for 1 minute, please, and then we need to move on. So someone in the group is going to be keeping track of that. So after the break, we're going to have our chat box challenge where everyone is going to type in their top thing. so that you can see we're all in this together. And then we'll also identify some of those go-to phrases. So we ready to move into our breakout rooms?
Yep, give me just 1 second. I'll get everybody in there.
All right, and we'll set this up for 30 minutes or so, 35 minutes.
35?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. All right. Give me just 1 moment to make sure everybody else has successfully been moved into rooms. So give me just 1 moment.
Caitlin, I don't know if you tried saying something, but no, I didn't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Oh, now, okay, I just heard that.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Hi.
Hello.
I'm just keeping my picture off because my Wi-Fi is super slow. I think there's construction in my building, but I can hear.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I always get a little nervous with the breakout rooms when I have to like place people into them. So it looks like everything's going smooth. So why don't we just go around and do some quick introductions here first. So like Mark introduced me earlier, I'm Ken Plord and I'm from T-Task. And I guess we'll go, I'll call on everybody just so there's no confusion of who goes next. So Kelly, why don't you go next?
Sure. I'm Kelly Waterhouse, and I work for the town of West Hartford in Social Services Department, and we're actually starting this Thursday will be our very first like coalition meeting. So we're doing it from the ground up. There's like a town board that exists for to give recommendations, but we wanted the more action oriented, for the coalition. So we're looking to start that. So my responses to some of these questions may be a little different since we haven't even had our first meeting, but maybe it'll be hopes for, and right before this, I was actually meeting with somebody else to try to plan the agenda and like, where do we start? So.
Nice. Oh, that's so exciting. Karen, how about you go next?
Yes, good morning. I'm Karen Ravenel Bloom. I'm the prevention coordinator for the Wyndham Pride Coalition. And I've been here in the position for 5 years and but done prevention for a long time in the community. And so we have been facilitating, our coalition meetings, but, just finding this so far really helpful. Just for tweaking the work we do. So thank you for hosting that.
Oh, excellent. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. And Kiana, did I say that correctly? Yes.
Yeah, correctly. Hi, I'm Kiana Mayo. I'm part of I co-chair the Hartford Regional List group, and I'm here for information, basically.
Great, thank you. And is it Ina?
Yes, it is. Good morning, everyone, and my apologies for coming in late. I'm multitasking. I am the program coordinator for Bridgeport United Coalition and the LPC. That is what I do. I'm here because I need to be here. It's important, I think, for everybody to understand and identify their roles in being part of a coalition or organization. And I think as we were going through the first half, it clicked in my head, ding, 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 that I am not just the secretary, that I actually have a bigger role in this. So
Excellent.
I'm gonna leave it there.
That's great. Thanks, Ina.
Thank you.
Daniela.
Hi, everyone. Daniela Arias here. I am the program coordinator at the Hub. We are the Regional Behavioral Health Action Organization for Region 1. So we work with all of the local prevention councils with the 14 towns within our region. So I'm here to get better information and be able to help better assist those councils.
So, thanks, Daniela. And Caitlin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Comet. I am also a program coordinator with the Hub. And I apologize for not having my camera on. I think there's some Wi-Fi issues. So I know if you turn it off, it kind of helps. But I'm here, same as Daniela, to kind of see how we can better our work and also learn how we can be a better support to our LPCs and to our region.
Excellent. Thanks, Caitlin. All right. So I know, Kelly, you guys are just starting off with meetings, like you said. So, excuse me, you may not have anything that you'd like to change just quite yet. But those of us who are, running or have some role in meetings, regularly occurring meetings, what are some things that you would want to change about your current situation with your meetings? And we can just, don't be shy. Anybody just speak up.
I'll jump in.
Okay.
I'll just say, so our coalition has really grown. We have a lot of people represented, like in each sector. For example, the police department, at this point, we have, about 4 or 5 staff, just because there's been some turnover, and then there have been some new people that have come on, but people also want to be getting, the minutes and the agendas, but can't, as a police department, can't always make the meetings. So I think, our coalition has grown to a large size. So I think one of the challenges too is in terms of attendance. So for example, like the police department, sometimes there isn't anyone who's able to be represented at a meeting. So and it's just, I know given any given thing, or someone from the schools, that things can get really busy for them, and so people just can't always make all the meetings. So I'm just putting that out. We always have enough people to make the meeting feel I guess that there's a fullness still, because people share things that they're doing as well. But I just, sometimes I'm just wondering, has our membership, do we need to limit the membership a little bit more in terms of numbers too? So I'm just putting that out.
Yeah. No, that's good. Has anybody else had experienced that kind of same thing, where your numbers grow like quite a bit, and then it's kind of gets to be larger groups are always a little bit harder to manage and get everybody on the same page and get everybody to meet, like you were saying? I know I've run into that problem before as well. What are some adjustments that you guys have made to to accommodate for that? Have you guys limited size as a response? Anyone that's dealt with this before, or have you taken other approaches like subcommittees that may meet on their own in different kind of forms?
I know we have done some subcommittees, and we also really try to, we've done things like send out polls and stuff to really figure out what time and day works best for everyone. And if we know one week is a bad week, we try and kind of go around that. So we really try and keep the communication open of what works best for everyone else. Of course, you can't accommodate everyone, but we really try our best that way. So every time before we kind of go into the new fiscal year or something like that, we reach out to them to make sure that that's still the best time for them and day.
Can I ask if, is anyone meeting like in person currently? Or is it all virtual?
Some of our local prevention councils have gone back to in person.
Yeah, I know of a few coalitions that are holding in-person meetings, but I think pretty much the majority of them are still all remote. Now,
Yeah.
are you meeting in person, Kelly, when you have your
We opted, yeah, to plan an in-person one, and then I had a request from someone like, oh, well, what about like people from the medically compromised like community, or that have like children with like significant disability, because like we were going to offer childcare, and then so like I'm like, oh geez, like the space, it's tough to like do both, like, you know, there's not monies like behind this, and like we have like a staff that's bilingual, so like we are trying to bring some technology into the room, and we're going to try to also like offer a remote option for those. It's not like advertised, but I'm not sure how well it'll go, like in terms of hearing and picking up sound and stuff, so I guess we'll see. We'll see, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think you're in the territory right now then that a lot of people are starting to get into with their coalitions. Like, how do we make this like hybrid meeting space happen right now? And exactly what you're talking about right now. If you have a group that's in a room and another group that wants to participate remotely, it can be a little logistically and like technology challenging.
Yeah,
so I think
not everywhere has like a school smart board, like in a classroom type setting with like a camera that can get the whole room, and so.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I think that you brought up a really good point earlier, though, when you said that you made childcare available. That's a very, very good idea, because I know, and I've heard quite a bit from other coalitions in the past that, yeah, sometimes if you're trying to get a bunch of, parents to a meeting at nighttime, it's super challenging if they have children. So offering that service for a meeting time is a really good idea. Anybody else have the same experience or a similar experience, or made adjustments for some bigger groups?
And with the Bridgeport United Coalition, we're still virtual. We're still meeting virtual. And we're hoping that by the end of the year, or somewhere later on, that we'll be able to meet in person. Our unique as the Bridgeport United Coalition in partnership with the with drug-free communities, we are in our 10th year. We have now started our 10th year of the cycle, which is our last year. And so as we continue to do the work, literally now there's some conversation about once the funding stops to continue with the coalition, and to figure out how that would kind of play out. Bridgeport Police Department has done some shifting and realigning. So we literally lost our person who was a part of the community division. They actually shut down the community division. And so we lost our person that was our liaison to the police department. And I believe that we're still trying to work that out, because somewhere in the rules of coalitions, they signed an agreement to be a part of the coalition. And so we're still trying to figure out and how that works out for us. But the work is the work, and it's still needed, and people will show up however you make space for them. you keep, you figure out the agenda, you look at what's important, what's the plan, and you continue to do the work.
Yeah, that's another really, really good point, is like, especially when you're in a coalition that is like seasoned is yours going into your 10th year, like you said, some of those relationships, I mean, you have to build up trust and a solid relationship over that time. And what happens when, then the next person in line isn't quite like that person used to be, and the relationship structure is quite different. That can be a huge challenge. Yeah, and that can also take up a lot of meeting time when you're trying to, get some answers to those questions, like you were saying, with like the agreement memorandums that were from the beginning. And, so yeah, that's another really good point. I'll share real quick, kind of in response to what Karen brought up about, growing in size and managing some larger groups and getting participation. Some of the adjustments I've made in the past with that is I had some large groups of people that were very active on my coalition, but they would never be able to show up when I had like meeting times. And I would put my meeting times like all over the place, time wise, day wise, to try to like figure out like what might be the ideal time. And still, I found this like other like separate group, it was worth my time. And I was fortunate enough to have a little bit more time where I could meet with them at a separate location for like, an hour or something, in addition to that monthly meeting that I was holding with my coalition. I would almost be the one that would debrief back from that group. So, when you have like a committed group of people that are still doing a lot of work, but they're not at the meeting, it's trying to figure out, all right, how do I still utilize all these people and make everything they're doing inclusive with my coalition? So I kind of would do that and just like debrief everybody on a few separate other groups that I would consider part of my coalition, but they just wouldn't really ever be able to be there at the meetings. And that's okay. As long as there's folks that are committed to doing some of the work, then it doesn't matter as much if they don't attend your meeting. You can just adjust your meeting to be just with them. So that's what I did.
Yeah. So Ken, just you bringing that up, I guess I want to sort of bring that to something that I'm also thinking, and then thinking, well, maybe how we could fold this into our meeting. For the schools, for example, we have a community and family liaisons. So there's a coordinator of all that, and an assistant coordinator, and then there are the family liaisons. So they want to invite us to, because we have a new staff person, to one of the family liaison meetings. So I'm just thinking too, even that kind of thing where like there's a school, or like at one point there's the before and after school task force, and I would go to those meetings. So sometimes what I find too happens is there's also other committees, like I'm on an opioid task force. There are a lot of members of our coalition that also serve on the opioid task force. So just kind of looking at different ways that we're still, like you said, kind of still doing the work. And maybe it's their committee that we then go and we're sitting in with them a couple times a year, but then when we report back to our funding source, I guess that's the question of maybe how we work that in. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense of how I described it?
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing it like it's not necessarily, you wouldn't see it as your role to be going to some of these other meetings with these other things, but you're finding yourself to build capacity within your coalition. You have to go to these things, but is that really inside the scope of your work? Is that what you're saying? Or
no, because I think we do really partner, like with the before and after school folks and the family liaisons. There are many projects or events that we can collaborate on. So I think we're all doing the work of prevention, or it's an awesome way to get things and word out, or to collaborate where we know there's going to be their connections with parents and the schools. So I think then when it comes back to when we report, you know, how many coalition meetings we've had during the year or attendance, to somehow be able to still, I know it may sound funny, but kind of get credit for those other things where we're still partnering with a lot of people in the schools, but it may be being at their meeting as opposed to them, you know, always being able to attend one of our meetings, if that
Like
makes,
those are more collateral type meetings.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, it is difficult to figure out, especially, I don't know, in some of the systems that we have to report into, how, yeah, you don't get credit for a lot of the time that you spend in, and you kind of have to get creative away on how you report those things. So yeah, it would be, I know exactly what you mean by that, because I feel like I've had a lot of those like lost times in relationships that didn't get reported as effectively as they could have.
Whoops. So maybe, I mean, I'm also wondering if then that also could be considered like a subcommittee. You know what I'm saying? That we're still networking with and partnering, and some of the things within our grants also, these projects are within their, you know, capacity of what we're working on. So I'm just trying to figure out how, as you know, coalition reporting, we can best make it work for all of us, you know?
Yeah, to truly highlight what you're doing. Yeah. So if we could shift gears here just a little bit, because one of the fun things that I like to talk about a little bit is we've all had those difficult meetings and how to like troubleshoot a little bit on the fly if some things unexpectedly come up at meeting, or there's disruptive people, because I think that this is a really good skill to have as a coalition leader, is how to be able to kind of do a little bit of conflict resolution during meetings. So does anybody have any good stories that they could share about how they were able to control some of situations like that in a meeting when things go a little awry? No, everybody has. Do you have any tactic? Nobody has any tactics that they or go-to phrases, for instance, if things start going a little. I think we had a go-to phrase challenge here. I'm just rereading the breakout room notes here. So
Yeah,
what?
help manage time. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm reading it off right. What is the group's top 5 list of go-to phrases to help manage time or deal with group dynamics? I know time can be a little bit tricky sometimes, especially when somebody has very good things to say, or you get in a conversation that's great, and you don't want to be respectful of people's time, but you want to catch all the good things in that moment. So can anybody share some of their time tricks?
If it's a topic that comes up, because sometimes what happens is conversations, they start one place on subject, and then they kind of rotate out somewhere else. And I just very gently remind people that we want to stick to the subject at hand. So although that what you're saying is very good, and I'm not dismissing it, we can table that part. I'll make a note of it, table that part, and we can bring it up at another meeting. But in order to get through the agenda that we have on the table, and to respect everyone's time, we're going to pull, and I'll let them go for maybe 60 seconds or so. But at some point you have to pull it back in, because then you can look, particularly if you're on Zoom, you look around and you start looking at the faces or the buttons that then the faces disappear and we're at names. And,
Yep.
and so you have to pull it, you have to kind of just chuckle I have a funny sense of humor, but we just pull it in. And, I thank you for your remarks. I will make a note of it, and we can come back to that. We can even talk about it offline, but we want to stick to the agenda and get through what we need to get through, so that we can respect everyone's time.
I know I haven't managed any of these meetings, but like coming from a clinical background or whatever, a lot of times and working with interns, sometimes you just get wrapped up and you lose track of time. So even setting a timer, you know what I mean? With that will go off 5 minutes before as kind of a prompt, so that it and you let people know I'm gonna, to prompt ourselves or whatever to make sure that we have time to adequately wrap up or to kind of summarize what we just did, that, you have some sort of alert or sound or whatever, whether on your phone, that will remind you of that.
All right. Now, just trying to see if there's anything else so I printed my slides out for that. So small, my eyes are starting to go. I can barely read. I think we've answered it, answered all the questions pretty well. So I guess, so Kelly, let me just, in wrapping up, you got another 9 minutes, it looks like. So with your meeting coming up, what are some of the concerns you have, and maybe all of us here in this room, since we've had a bunch of meetings and have some experience with these prevention meetings, we can give you some advice on things you may be concerned about. I know definitely. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, yeah, that would be great. But
yeah. So what else are you running into is some concerns that you might have besides the the kind of hybrid technology?
Yeah. So I mean, we have a grant. We have a grant that through Amplify that was supposed to technically be in on last Friday, but we were getting a little bit of an extension on. We talked to them because our coalition is just forming. So social services is kind of taking the lead on that, as us kind of trying to get the coalition off the ground. But obviously we want that to be kind of community led, right? And we want the community to step up. And I don't necessarily, we're talking about leadership and things like that. And I feel like it's kind of on myself and on kind of Astrid right now in our department. But we want to be able to foster kind of that leadership. But again, we don't really know what we're stepping into. We put a broad invitation out. We had there was a news article, there's invitation we selectively emailed out to some known people within the community, that maybe might have a vested interest. And we've definitely gotten some response. So I think it's going to be definitely a diverse group. I worry a little of how do we focus in on what we're going to tackle, because the grant that we're going for obviously will have a couple of objectives and things that we need to do focused on youth and vaping prevention, I think marijuana, enactment right now. So there'll be some goals around that, but there's obviously so many things and so many needs that exist. So for me, I think my head's kind of exploding a little bit with that of if some people are the opioid and then, mental health, and then you have the marijuana, and it's I know we can't do everything. So making sure that everyone feels heard at the coalition and that we really identify, well, what is going to be our priority, and we're forming, right? So we don't have we don't have a mission, a vision, we have to do all of those things while still trying to do some action stuff too, because people like to jump to action, but you don't want to get too ahead of yourself either. So that's any response.
See if anybody else has anything to say before I offer a few things. Well, so again, starting from square one is super challenging. I think though you were kind of getting right on the money when you were talking about, what's the point of this group, and what are we actually focusing on, right? And and what are we binded by our contract to focus on? And I think those things right off the bat is are probably going to be the most important things to establish. And you're right. I mean, there's going to be people coming in that all have their areas that they are more committed to in the arena of prevention. But like the connections we were making kind of before in the presentation is we're all doing prevention in some kind of form. So, and there's always going to be give and take too, even though it may not be, you know, if you're not focused on underage drinking, but you have people on your coalition that are involved with other underage or that are involved with underage drinking prevention efforts, they're going to be connected to a lot of other people in town too. So you're going to strengthen your capacity through those people as well. Any other thoughts on what some of these priority items to be discussed at the first meeting and your opinions would be? Anybody else in the group?
I would say when you have a grant or when you fund it by grant, and I don't know if that's your case, Kelly, but whatever the action plan is, be sure you know what items are in the action plan for the coalition, because that will help you shape how to move your meetings forward and how to form your mission. So if the mission is to help prevent the use of substances and underage alcohol prevention for the community youth, based on youth, and I'm just using that as an example, then however the grant was written, those items in the grant have to be fulfilled. And so you would want to just go back and look at that and allow that to help you shape how your coalition is going to be set up and what items you have to get done in order to fulfill those things that have been written for.
Thank you.
And another thing, like I'll share, and I know this is a little bit further down the road than where you're at right now, Kelly, but I know when I was in your same community doing coalition work, it took me a while to get there, but eventually I got into a flow with my coalition where bringing in guest speakers would be kind of the norm. And I fell into like this really good system where it was like, you know, we knew what the topic at hand coming up would be in the months to come. We would identify some kind of speaker in our community who would talk on that topic. And it made it easy to plan and, you know, my meetings out too, because I had like a template that I was starting to follow with agenda items, short presentation, followed by an expert speaker, followed by, you know, some discussion. And I think that getting into that kind of system really helped my coalition grow. Everybody knew what to kind of expect coming into the meeting. And I think when people start knowing what to expect that things tend to go a little bit better.
So did you focus more on the education of the actual coalition members, or like how did you then transition to, I mean, obviously the coalition members need to be, understand the issues and be knowledgeable, but then how did you then translate that to the broader community for like prevention kind of overall?
So if we were on, I don't know, maybe capacity building phase of the SPF, in that I would set my meeting to talk about this capacity building phase. And, you know, maybe you would bring in a speaker from the Chamber of Commerce in your community for something like that. They could come and talk about, you know, related prevention events that are occurring in town, you know, how you could, you know, partner up with some of these folks. And then that would lead to community events that the chamber would put on that we would get, you know, maybe invited to and build up these bigger networks. And while we were at the community events, education was part of the outreach work that we would be doing, if you will. So yeah, the education component came in that form, if that answers your question. But again, that, that was, building down the line a little bit from where you are right now. All right, we got 35 seconds. Any final thoughts before we move back to the main room?
I just want to follow up too for Kelly in terms of starting a new coalition and so forth. One of the things that I've tried to do is when we can is develop some of those so that you develop some of those personal relationships as we heard through character trainings, having that cup of coffee, if you will, of whether it's for right now phone meetings or whatever, or going to visit them in their where they are, and showing, also bringing back to them in the meeting that they're resources for one another, for other things outside of the coalition. So,
yeah. I think we've done.
All right, are we all back in session here? So put your, in the chat box challenge, put your one thing that you want to focus on in improving your meeting management, so everyone can appreciate that we're part of a larger group, and we can also perhaps help each other along the way. And then put in your go-to phrases if you have any of those. And so some of the themes that we were hearing throughout the breakout rooms were how people are adjusting their leadership style, or maybe reaching out to engaged partners, structuring their agenda differently, and so on. In the meeting packet that you're going to get, we put some scenarios in. What would you do? So that you could look over these, and two things. One, follow a framework of identifying the issue, making sure you're aware of the opportunity that comes with that issue, and then some possible solutions. So you can take a look at these. These may relate to some of the priority areas that you identified. We have slides set up for unengaged participants, new people showing up to each meeting, little time for discussion, follow-up tasks are not getting done, no leadership succession plan, who's going to be taking your position, few people dominate the discussion. So you'll be getting those as part of the meeting packet. And then as a matter of a larger review, today we did a high-level flyover, and the core messages: you know more than you think you know, especially from your lived experiences. So draw upon that. Master some of the fundamentals of your process, including the SPF, understanding what prevention means and how people fit in. Work to your strengths as a leader. Identify what your partners and your participants in the group can offer, and make sure you're working to include them and build a high-performing team. Identify a small set of priorities that you can all work to improve on. You don't have to solve everything at once. And then just know you have a community of resources and supports in the prevention space. You're part of the larger ecosystem. There's regional behavioral health action councils that are all supporting this work. There are other resource link partners. There's the Training and Technical Assistance Center that does trainings, offers tools, explainer videos that you could use at your coalition meetings. And before we get to our last poll, I'm just going to stop the screen share and Anything else in the chat box that we should be paying attention to?
No, just everyone's great answers on, ways to improve or issues they, are looking to improve upon going forward. Some of their go-to phrases: sounds like a plan, want to hear from everyone, sharing is caring, just looking at the clock. Some people moving on, but just really, I think that it comes down to, if I were to sum it up, looking at frequency, how often and when people are meeting, making sure that certain people don't monopolize our time and how we address those kinds of challenges, and recruiting new people to the coalition and making sure we have those diverse stakeholders. So in sum.
Okay, so we're going to put up a last interactive poll, and this one is your meeting experience today. And this is something that, again, we're role modeling, something that you should be doing at the end of every one of your meetings to understand people's experience and use that feedback to adjust. And so check all the boxes that are true. And we thank you for that. And the other thing is, if you do have any follow-up questions, just contact us at TTask. And we're ready to help and support you with any tools or have a quick conversation, whatever makes sense for you. And you can open up your mics if you have any other comments at this time. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending and sharing.
Mark, this is Charity in Colchester. I just wanted to ask real quick if TTask does any of these trainings for coalitions. Like, could we have you hop into a virtual presentation?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Anybody have a very first agenda meeting for their coalition? We're making ours today.
You want to cover the basics, so we can help. I mean, Ken can help with that, I'm sure.
I think we're probably in pretty good shape, but.
If you need a sample, go ahead and just email us.
And one of the things we can do too, Kelly, or anyone, is, we can have a conversation over Zoom or by the phone, and you share sort of what are you dealing with right now? And then we can talk about, some different ways to approach it, because I know you're in a different place than a lot of coalitions that are first coming together. There's a rich history in West Hartford about past prevention efforts. So yeah, so, we're available just to, fly questions by too and talk about particulars of your situation. Right, Ken?
Oh yeah, and I just want to say too that you're really on the right track, Kelly and Astrid, because when I saw your flyer for the first meeting, the fact that you were offering childcare and advertised that you were offering that's awesome. I like to see that.
And if you're in a situation where you may have some past dynamics, acknowledge and embrace.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have to discount anyone. Everyone, whatever they have done, positive or other, has helped that community get to this place in their journey.
Yeah.
So,
And I have the benefit of saying, like, I'm new to the town anyway, so I can play, acknowledge, empathize, whatever. And okay, well, this is where we are now, and kind of go forward with it.
Exactly. And I think by doing that, you not only sort of set the stage for where we are and why we're doing what we're doing, but there's also a way to say, we've been doing prevention here, for a while, and we've identified different resources and we've had success. So we're building on that foundation. I think it's good for people to know.
But yeah, please reach out, Kelly or Astrid, if you have any more last minute questions leading up to this first meeting. Be happy to help.
I thank everybody for the good wishes. I think it's a big deal that we're doing this. I feel the positive. I know we are going to be struggling at times, especially with different forces or pressures that we have here in town. But we are, Kelly and I and other people are ready, and we know that we have a lot of support from many people like you. So we thank you.
Okay, anything else? Well, look out for an email with your certificates and so on, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks everyone for coming. Ken, you want to stop record?